Hello, everyone. I'm Neena Gopal. Welcome to Global Express, where we take a close look at developments in the region and beyond, particularly ones that impact India. There are alarm bells going off in Washington and Kyiv. Vladimir Putin's nuclear sabre-rattling has Ukraine on the edge. It has Europe and NATO on the edge now over conflicting reports that Russia has fired intercontinental ballistic missiles at the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. Ukraine hasn't provided evidence that 8 missiles were fired, and Russia hasn't acknowledged or denied it so far. But this is after Ukraine fired 6 long-range missiles at Russia days ago. The significance of Russia's move is that these ICBMs are designed to carry atomic warheads, a prod, if you will, of Russia's nuclear capability. These were fired from Russia's Astrakhan region on the Caspian Sea. Russia did acknowledge, however, that had downed British-made Storm Shadow missiles. So the Russia-Ukraine war not only marks 1,000 days of this week with this dramatic confrontation. U.S. President Joe Biden marked the 1,000th day by authorizing the use of US-made long-range missiles, the ATACMS, and Kiev fired 6 of them 170 kilometers into Russian territory, into Bryansk for the very first time. Now, all of this has also been followed by the US clearing the use of Ukraine, laying anti-personnel landmines in Russian territory. And most important of all, Russia has amended its nuclear doctrine. So the US and other NATO countries are definitely concerned. The US embassy, the embassies of Hungary, Greece, Spain, etc., and Italy opened a shutdown, and then the US has reopened its embassy. But everyone who has been fed that pup that when President Trump takes office on January 20th, all wars will end is asking the big question. Will sitting US President Joe Biden, the lame duck president, who has some 60 days left in office, allow this to happen? Because he clearly doesn't want his legacy to be that of a man who allowed Ukraine to be subjugated by Russia in any way. But could the Russian President Vladimir Putin now unleash a nuclear Armageddon? Talking to us today, our Ambassador K P Fabian. He witnessed the Iranian Revolution firsthand when he was posted there from 76 to 79. He was also the main mover and shaker in the evacuation of over 170,000 Indians from Iraq and Kuwait in 1991, during the first Gulf War when Iraq invaded Kuwait. He served in Qatar, Austria, Finland, Canada, and Italy, and represented India at the UN as well. He's also the author of 2 fabulous books, Common Sense of War in Iraq and Diplomacy Indian Style. Welcome, Ambassador Fabian.
Thank you, Neena. Always a pleasure to be speaking to you and through you to the millions of your viewers.
Oh my gosh, aapke muh mein ghee shakar. We also have with us the expert on air defense, the highly decorated Lieutenant General Dr. K Saxena, with PVCMs, AVCM, BSMs. He was the former Director General of the Army Air Defense and is now a Distinguished Fellow at St. John's and a Distinguished Visiting Fellow at Claws. His knowledge on air defense aspects of the war just completely changed the way that wars are being fought today, both in Russia, Ukraine, and in Israel, Iran, are an eye-opener. Welcome, General Saxena.
Thank you very much. Very humbling words.
And least but not least, we're very pleased to have Vanshika Saraf, research analyst for the Indo-Pacific Studies program at the Takshashila Institution in Bangalore, who focuses on the geopolitics of the Indo-Pacific and India's foreign policy. Welcome, Vanshika Saraf.
Thank you, Neena, for having me.
Ambassador Fabian, let me start with you. President Biden's decision to supply long-range missiles as the ACTMs to Ukraine clearly seems to have exploded in this face. You now have Russia launching ICBMs, 8 missiles is what I understand, which have hit the city of Dnipro. And the casualties are only 2 so far. But would you say that President Biden's handling of foreign policy has not shown leadership at all? Instead of using diplomatic channels to bring an end to the conflict, he's been taking a hard line. He's had the NATO countries, lining up, pushing for Ukraine to join NATO, which is what was the sticking point with Russia in the first place. Do you agree with that, the comment that I've made at all,
I do.
Ambassador Fabian?
Yes, thank you. I do, Neena, because let me make a few points. One, this is what I call a war that could have been avoided, because in the middle of December 2021, President Putin sent a draft of treaties, uh, giving security guarantees to Russia because
Yeah.
of the likely expansion of NATO to include Ukraine.
Mm.
Now, instead of engaging in diplomatic negotiations, President Biden resorted to public diplomacy of a very vicious variety, and he dismissed President Putin's request.
Mm.
So the war could have been avoided, but President Biden thought that let there be a war, then with American sanctions, the Russian economy will crumble and Putin might be replaced even, and maybe Russia, the most biggest country on earth, can be, destabilized. You see, that was his intention, which he has said so many times, ruble into rubble and all that, if you remember.
Yes, yes.
Second thing is that he did not follow up properly. He gave, the long-range missiles and other weaponry always too late, too little. You know what I mean? He delayed things. In other words, he was not consistent. Third thing is that we have to understand that Russia enjoys local military superiority in that part of the world. And despite the NATO's spending, you can calculate how many times Russia's defense expenditure, it can easily be 10, 11, 12 times Russia's military expenditure. NATO cannot win this war unless it is prepared to send boots onto the ground, which it is not prepared. So
That's a good point.
Biden has followed a policy which is inconsistent. Now, the last point I want to make is that you mentioned about the ICBMs, and you added that, no serious casualties have been reported as yet.
Yes.
What is important about the ICBMs is that they can carry a nuclear warhead. That is what is important. And you know that Russia has recently, the other day, changed its nuclear doctrine.
Exactly.
You know about it.
Yes. That's a very important development because its nuclear doctrine now says that even an unarmed nuclear nation, if it's backed by nuclear nations, then they are all in it. They will all face the wrath of Russia. General, can I bring you in? Because Russia clearly has a reason for launching these ICBMs today, and there are visuals now of showing the Russian spokesperson be getting a call from God knows who, saying that she shouldn't comment on the fact that Russia has fired these ICBMs. So, is it possible that these ICBMs have caused more damage than Ukraine is letting on? Because and also, to get back to Ambassador Fabian's point, the fact that it can carry nuclear warheads is a very alarming development.
Indeed, Nina, you said it absolutely right. First of all, let us just understand that Russia's nuclear muscle is something which is to be a thing of the reckoning. As per the latest count, they have something like 5,580 warheads and 1,700 strategic arsenal ready to be used, with ICBMs ranging from 11,000, 5,800 kilometer range to 10,000 kilometers in the land carrier. They have ICBM capable of being launched by submarines and nuclear weapons being capable to be launched by aircrafts.
Yeah, yeah.
This whole story does not end in just this development. What is this
Mm,
happening? Let us just analyze this. Now, as you rightly said, and as the ambassador brought out, that how the lack of leadership or the steward diplomacy let a lame duck president in the last 2 months of his tenure permitting Ukraine to use his long range missiles to hit inside Russia is not something which is to be taken as the first point of inflection. It is second
mm.
point of inflection. You know what happened? Earlier, when the war started, right from the time when the war started on 24th February 2022, and thereabout when the US and the Western arsenal came inside Ukraine, you had you had attack CMs, you had ATCMs, and you had other weapons with Ukraine. But what was the condition? They were to be fired only inside Ukraine, in the Ukrainian battlefield, on the targets in the captured territories by Russia. That is one. Now something started to change in May 2022. What happened that time?
May 2024.
May 2024, you have to go back then. May
Yeah.
2024, there was a development in which Russia started to concentrate a large mass of artillery and air power in a place called Belgorod, which is on the
Uh-huh.
northwest of Ukraine, which is on the southwest corner of Russia. And from there, attacks were being launched because it is only 35 kilometers from Kharkiv. They were
I
started
see.
to launch a large number of aerial attacks and massed artillery firepower on Kharkiv. And from the Kharkiv, they wanted to go across toward making inroads towards Kiev and to the gut land or the heartland of Ukraine. At that time, a crisis developed, and President Zelensky made a cry to whom all? To French President Emmanuel Macron, to
Mm.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and to President Biden that please allow me to fire your missiles onto the targets from where the resistance is originating, from where the war waging potential is emanating to destroy me and my targets. A decision was taken on 29th May by the French president and the German chancellor that yes, you can fire our weapons on the targets which from where the war waging potential is originating to destroy your targets in Ukraine. That is the
I see.
first point of inflection. That was the first point of inflection. But still, both the countries and the US never allowed their weapons to be used inside Russia, inside Russian territory, in deep inside Russian territory. Now
So
remember,
what was the reason that Biden then decided to change the dynamic?
I will interpret in my humble way what is the reason. The reason can be counted as five, six reasons in my wisdom. Firstly, what is this is has been a Biden's trump card or what is it, power to show that I supported Ukraine to the hilt, and as the ambassador brought out, I crumbled the Russian mighty power into defeat. Was his
Oh.
reason attire for all these age at the time
Mm.
when Russian advances are going on at such a pace, he wanted to somehow halt the accelerated pace at this. You know that after the Battle of Bakhmut, the Advitka, and now Pokros, you know how much territory Russia has gained in 2024? 2,700 square kilometers as compared to 2023, where it was only 465 kilometers. That is the rate at which they are advancing. Even in the Kursk, when the 1,300 square kilometer was taken by Ukraine, already they have retaken 587. So what is happening? There is a danger that all this kahani, all this history of browbeating Russia into a defeat and supporting Ukraine to the hilt was at a stake. So it says, okay, allow this to even fire there.
Mm.
Second was that he said that now everybody knows and it is there in the Google. I don't want to speak. What is the policy of Trump in ending the war in 24 hours and so on and so forth? He says before the policy shift takes place, let me take a stand of giving them this last minute food. Somebody also says he wants to leave a legacy of the shame of the shame which he suffered in the Afghanistan withdrawal of the
That's right.
US to at least now
That's the
have
conclusion
a
that I
change,
drew. Yeah.
change somehow. And finally, the North Korean troops. Now
Yes.
a new front has been opened. A country has opened a third front. Somebody is saying 10,000, 11,000. President Zelensky has said 100,000 troops will be firing at.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that
It's
now
basically
all this,
internationalizing. It's
yeah,
also
all this stuff now.
internationalizing the conflict
You,
itself.
you can
Vanshik,
you can guess the frustration, desperation of a man who's just about to leave office. His main agenda, his main flag, which he started out with, is petering away, and Afghanistan is sitting at is staring him at his face, and now he says another one at Ukraine. Same fate. Let me at least give them some teeth so that they can live up to my dream of supporting this proxy war.
that's very interesting.
You hear the statement of Donald Trump today, madam, on X. He says we are closer to World War III than any time in the past. He says this has and he's called first time this war a proxy war of the West and US. That,
That's really actually very
yes.
potent.
Yes.
Vanshika, if I can bring you in, do you
Yes.
agree with this conclusion that World War III is about to implode on us? Because I mean, clearly, and the fact that we should actually point fingers not just at Biden, but also Jens Stoltenberg, the NATO chief. I mean, he was the one who's apparently responsible for lighting this little fire, which has turned into a huge flame because the falling out between Putin and NATO is at the heart of this conflict.
Yes, Neena. So I'll pick up first from what K Saxena started by saying about May 2024, which was a turning point. And so here we see US easing its restrictions on US supplied weapons, right? So to be able to help the Ukrainians defend Kharkiv, we saw Biden allowing Ukraine use HIMARS, the high mobility rocket system.
Mm.
And now we see at that time Biden did not allow the use of ATACMS, but now we see they have allowed the long range missiles. So if we go into the motivations of why is Biden doing this now, there can be a few. One is that it wants to strengthen Ukraine's hand in case of any peace talks which might come up after the Trump administration. And as he mentioned that now North Korean troops are involved, it can also be a signaling to North Korea that you're vulnerable and you shouldn't send any more troops across. And the third is that Ukraine has made some significant gains in the Kursk region. And so strengthening Ukraine now would maybe allow it to have better terms of negotiation in exchange of territory. So these are some of that have been discussed on why Biden has supplied the allowed the use of ATACMS now. Now coming to
But to
the
but to
revision.
NATO's bad decision making also. I mean, the fact that they were repeatedly told by Russia and Putin that they did not want an eastward push by NATO into Russian territory, and meddling in Moscow's backyard, including Georgia and now Ukraine, something that Putin was never going to accept.
Yes, you're right. Absolutely. So I think if Putin's one of Putin's aims, as we're going to discuss his play, was to weaken NATO, I think that did not work. We see NATO increasing, strengthening its rhetoric. We see NATO now very decisively saying that Ukraine will one day become a part of us. And also recently we saw G7 elevate a new defense ministers meeting. So we see Europe realizing now that with Trump on the horizon that we cannot rely on American security guarantees, and we must defend Ukraine. And this will also relate to as you mentioned, sort of frustrating Russia. So, in the new nuclear doctrine, even Belarus is included if we see the
Yeah,
revision. So,
correct.
as you said, one of Russia's motivations to wage the war has been to decrease so called Western influence in Eastern Europe. Because we see Russia always trying to establish this sphere of influence, which is reminiscent of a Soviet era, which starts with making territorial advancements. And another key point, I think, in the revision of the doctrine is that before there was a question that there will be a potential nuclear response if there is a threat to the survival of the state. But now the words have been changed to a critical threat to sovereignty and territorial integrity. So I think what they've essentially done is expanded the interpretation of the doctrine, right? And even though Putin still knows that nuclear power is, credible for use for nuclear deterrence, but yes, another point to note is that this is very well timed. We are seeing the public announcement now, but Putin has been reviewing this nuclear doctrine since September. So
That's right.
this has been
It's
in the
not just
making
September,
for a
it's before
while.
that too.
Yes,
That's true.
yes,
It goes back to the St. Petersburg meeting, and it's been talked about for months now. But if I can just bring you in
absolutely.
again, Ambassador Fabian, do you think that President Biden should have at least briefed Trump on what he was planning to do? Previous presidents like the President Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson, both of whom brought the incoming presidents Richard Nixon on the various crises at that point. I mean, Lyndon Johnson in Vietnam and so on. Do you think Biden's foreign policy, the first bad call, as you all rightly said, was Afghanistan, but this one will be a blot? Because on the ground, Russia is not on the retreat. It's actually moving very fast, very swiftly. And Ukraine looks as if it's going to, pay the price for this.
Uh, Let me put it this way. Whatever conversation took place between the outgoing president and the incoming president is totally confidential.
Okay.
So we do not know what transpired.
Hmm.
Second point is that Trump was not going to say, okay, now given the situation, I do agree that we have no other option. Trump would not have done that. But let me just, if you don't mind, raise a question because you raised this nuclear matter.
Yeah.
I want to say that anything is possible, but my view is that Putin does not have to use you do not have to use a nuclear weapon to get what he wants.
He doesn't have to use a nuclear weapon to get what he wants.
Yes,
Because
all that he has to do is to issue an ultimatum. Ukraine is given the following ultimatum. You should stop sending missiles into Russian territory, and within 4 hours you should make a declaration thereof. Unless you do that, consequences will follow. You do not have to say nuclear weapons. Consequences will follow, and I personally have no doubt, of course, subject to our distinguished interlocutors think about it, Biden will be compelled to tell Zelensky, make that declaration.
But it doesn't look as if Biden has any intention of telling Zelensky to hold back. At this point in time, I mean, he's got 60 days left in office, roughly. He wants to bring it to, I mean, to my mind, I may be completely wrong. I think he wants it to bring it to a particular point where, where Russia will also be forced to reassess where it stands vis-a-vis, the war.
I do not think that there is enough time left for that for Biden. And moreover, Putin can do what I suggested after the new Congress has assembled with a Republican majority. And if he issues that ultimatum, the Congress will tell the president, listen, you do what is appropriate for America's security. Stop this sort of brinkmanship.
That's a good point, actually. Stop the brinkmanship.
Yeah.
Yes. General, would you like to come in on that? I mean, the
Yeah.
fact is that I really want to know what the ground situation is because from what I understand, what I've read so far, Russia does control large swathes of territory that it didn't even a week ago, and that they are moving very fast and very quickly to also preempt Ukraine from from gathering territory. So if there is a peace plan or if there's a ceasefire of any sort, that they will be holding the upper hand.
Uh, Let me just kill this point in the beginning that today, this bargaining chip, when people are talking about, or in the peace talks, this will happen. You know, what is the type of territory which Russia holds today?
Hmm.
161,000 square kilometers, equivalent to 27% of the Ukrainian land, number one,
Oh,
as compared to some 1300 square kilometer to start with in Kursk, and today left to about 800 square kilometers of the land in the Ukrainian hand, which also they are going to lose slowly because some 50,000 troops across, along with the North Korean troops, are there now, mounting pressure on in the Kursk region to squeeze out. The word used is being squeeze out the Ukrainians from there. So forget about the bargaining chip position, because one is an elephant, other is a ant as regards the
hmm,
holding of the land, comparative land scenario. That is one. Second
right.
is this, what Ambassador brought out as a fantastic point. Let us just see the intricacies or fine print in the nuclear doctrine, which Vanshika also talked about. You know, prior to 2020, Russia had a nuclear doctrine which based on NFU, and say we will only use nuclear weapons when our very existence of the state is threatened. In
Mm,
September 2024. September 2024 is after the Russians, after the US and France and this allowed their missiles to be fired inside Russian territory on the targets which they are amassing their war waging potential. They said because now the threat is getting into Russia, and also the drone power was playing heavily. So the September 2024 amendment says that Russia reserves the right to use nuclear weapons when there is a critical threat to its sovereignty. You see,
yeah.
very existence of the state to critical threat to the sovereignty. Now take to the next step. Next step is what? Now. Now it says that Russia or Moscow reserves the right to nuclear weapon even if a country attacks with a conventional weapon such as aircraft missiles, drones, etc., if it is supported by a nuclear state. Look at the
Exactly.
turn of events. Now, the Russian foreign minister made some very, very interesting points in the G20 at Rio. What did he say? He says, what is the difference now than whatever has happened? He says it is for the first time that there is a direct confrontation of US troops. Mark my word, US troops,
Mm,
not US weapons, and the French and the British troops. Why he is saying so? He's saying so because the missiles, the army tactical missile system cannot be fired without the fire missions being inputted into them, which is still a drill or still something which is controlled by US. If you hear a
mm,
podcast by Mr. Chris, a very famous analyst in US today, he says that there was a team which was there from Lockheed Martin as also from the US security establishment. It has a direct link from the security establishment to the missile sites for feeding the secret link with the flight plan. So the foreign minister says now this is a direct foot on ground, boots on
yeah.
ground, direct
Yeah.
confrontation. Number one. Number two, what is number 2 point? Number 2 point, very important point, which is relates to nuclear, is that now you have breached my red line, which I had laid down. That do not strike with your weapon. Let Ukraine attack me with drones much larger range. They have attacked them in Kremlin. They have attacked them in the Black Sea. But don't bring your weapon. In fact, President Putin made a statement that supplying then nobody stops Russia now in supplying the weapons of the same class to those countries which can pose similar threat. Remember a nuclear armada and the nuclear missile Kazan and the Admiral Gorshkov and the oil tanker Pashin visited Cuba immediately after May 2024. What is this happening?
Wow.
What is this happening? They are now telling, look, you are crossing red line. We are giving you warning again and again. But to my way of thinking, the aggregation of this warning need not turn into a nuclear attack. Why? Because you hear foreign minister again. He says Russia is a responsible country. It will do everything to avoid a nuclear war. Remember that if a nuclear war does start, there are no winners in nuclear war. There is only catastrophic destruction everywhere. With 1700 nuclear warhead going over the North Pole and attacking Russia, and from that side coming, there will be no winner. So it is like brinkmanship. They are telling we are a responsible country, but we will do this. We have lowered the threshold. And today you see, lo and behold, they have fired an ICBM. That
Yes.
ICBM name is Robert. And it is
Oh,
Rubez. It is R-26 Rubez, range 5,800 kilometer, capability of carrying 800 kg of nuclear warhead. But if you look at Dnipro and the videos put out by both BBC and or Al Jazeera and Reuters and everybody, it does not say the type of mushrooming damage which comes from an ICBM. So
I see. Which means it wasn't carrying an atomic warhead.
restraint is still the name of the game. Why? Because Russia knows that so long as the threat is alive, the deterrence is alive. When the threat is played out, the deterrence gets killed. It is either a game of no win on either side except mutually assured destruction. That is why he is
That's very well
holding out
put.
the threat. That is why he is holding out the threat in this manner. And
Yeah.
what Ambassador brought out is a fantastic point that he need not use nuclear weapon, still keep the threat alive. So long
Yeah.
as you are deterred by me, you don't know my strength. But if I already attacked you, now you know my strength as well as my weaknesses. And even if you know my weakness, you will be able to strike at me.
Very
That is
much.
the point I wanted to bring out. And let us not forget to discuss the land mines, which is again very, very.
I'll come back to the landmines. I just want to bring in Vanshika. Vanshika, it's very clear that Putin is drawing not many red lines. Do you think that Zelensky in Ukraine will be able to keep himself going because he's actually lived past his sort of deadline? Really, he's illegal. Really, his legitimate term of office is over. And there's a lot of speculation that he is using the war, just like the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is, to stay on in office. Do you have something to comment on that? Because I think that's quite interesting that he's upping the ante in the way he is, even though he's gone past his term of office.
Yes, Neena. So I think does he really have any other option at the moment? Another thing that I've seen Zelensky doing is he has been appearing at, when he's been talking to America or NATO or the EU, he's been sort of encouraging them and telling them, the time has come when we can't stop now and we must continue to push Russia harder. And I think he's trying his best to rally support, to continue rallying support, and we can see, some of that bearing fruit. Um, and picking up from the nuclear question that General Saxena and Ambassador both mentioned, I think they're right. Russia doesn't need to use the weapons, and some have also pointed out that this might be Russia trying to make up for its sense of conventional inferiority, because we've seen Russia struggle very visibly, and especially with now calling the North Korean troops. I think Russia is also trying to remind the world that we are a nuclear power and we must be respected. Respect is something that Russia has always tried to, gain from the West in a way, because it feels that it's not been seen equally in the international order, and it lost face after the disintegration. So I think that might be another motivation. And I think, honestly, Putin did not anticipate that the war would go on for so long, that it would go on beyond the 1,000 days. And at this point, this conflict has become important for him to even, continue his domestic standing,
So
because
you're basically
he
saying
can't.
that just as Zelensky is trying to stay on, Putin is also trying to stay on.
Well,
I don't quite agree with that
absolutely.
second point, though, because he does have a lot of support within the establishment in Russia. I mean, it is this whole business about the nuclear doctrine, amending the nuclear doctrine, didn't come from him to begin with. It came from a very interesting, conversation that happened at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, where there was there's a famous writer, Dr. Sergei Karaganov, who's the one who originally raised the prospect of Russia deploying nuke weapons, and that was June 2023. And Putin didn't really agree with him at that point. He basically because Karganov said that Russia should lower its threshold for using nuclear weapons and contain, frighten, and sober up our opponents. So, I mean, even though he says that he didn't actually say we should deploy nuclear weapons, he said people had stopped fearing nuclear weapons, and he said we need to revive that fear. So, he's actually now seen what he said months ago coming into play. So I don't know. So my question basically is that what are we going to expect after this? I mean, here is Russia using ICBMs, and in response to the long-range missiles. What can we expect now, Ambassador Fabian?
I just want to bring to your notice that Gallup News has come out
Yes.
with a poll taken, which
Uh-huh.
says that 38% of Ukrainians want to fight on, and 50
Oh,
want to fight on, continue
yes,
the
yes,
fight, continue the war,
yes.
and 52% want immediate ceasefire.
There's also an exodus, Ambassador Fabian. I don't know what the numbers are. A huge exodus of Ukrainians who don't want this forcible conscription, and they're leaving in droves.
No, in fact, the conscription is such that, the security forces go to bars, dancing places, or whatever places and pick up young men. You know what I mean?
Oh,
It's so bad. Now, coming to your question, what might happen? I think it is evident that from a military point of view, Russia is gaining, and Ukraine, with all the support it has got so far, will not be able to stop Russia, make Russia reverse. Second point is that Trump is looming larger and larger.
mm.
And at the right time, according to him, he will announce that he would stop American support. And then, as you know, the second military supporter is Germany. You know that Scholz has not permitted the use of German, has not sent German long range weapons, missiles. And he is under pressure, but he has refused. And once America stops, and Germany is going to have an election, well, in that case, the military support and financial support and diplomatic support for Ukraine will crumble.
That's a good point.
And in that case, Zelensky might be replaced, and I'm afraid Ukraine will have to sign practically on the dotted line, dictated by Moscow. That looks like for the time being.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I have read that that there is a lot of although Russia has talked about nuclear retaliation, and as you all have said, nuclear retaliation doesn't look on the cards because I mean they will not get support, from China, India, Brazil, others in the global south. All of that will fade. So Russia also has only a limited maneuverability. Do you think that's an accurate assumption, General?
Uh, to my mind, you are partially right. But if you read the declaration of the Rio,
Hmm.
which President of Brazil has issued one day before,
Hmm.
he has not blamed Russia for the Russia-Ukraine war, and the text has been signed one day before the event actually got over. So to say that the Russian support of its offensive, both on ground as well as in the minds of the people, is still very much his support is there in the influence sphere of influence of Russia, very much there. And today you hear what the president of China has talked about. He
Mm,
says trade with caution, but the doctrine portion he has not commented. He has not said yes or no on that. At the same time, we are India a long-term and friend of Russia for our own while we practice strategic autonomy, but we have keeping away from deliberately commenting yes and no on the doctrine. The point
mm,
at issue is something else. The point at issue is that at this time and point in war, the events have folded in such a manner that Russia is now forced to amend its doctrine to say what it has been professing all along, that our response will be asymmetric and disproportionate. How do you say that? How do you
yeah.
convert that into words, into actions? How do you convert that? You say no, you fire with nuclear, even a non nuclear country. Look at the language. A non-nuclear country attacking with conventional weapons with the support of will have the Moscow will have the right to use nuclear weapons on that country. On that country is the word. Remember,
General, you brought up, drone warfare. Is that what? And you also said that in the initial Russian march on Ukraine, that it was, that this drone warfare was where the Ukrainians actually made dents in Russia. Am I correct?
absolutely. There's something called the chink in armor. I
Mm-hmm.
take your bite to February 2022, when after a preemptive strike, on the night of 22 and 23 and 24, Russia launched a very strong preemptive strike using their aircrafts, using their missiles, using their multi-barrel rocket launchers, etc. But unfortunately for President Putin, that strike failed to achieve its two primary aims. It failed to kill the air defenses of Ukraine fully. When I say kill the air defenses, it means kill the battle management and control system and kill the media that controls the air defense war. It failed to achieve success in the counter air operation of killing maximum air assets on ground.
No,
Therefore,
but this was also general a Ukraine which was not supported by the NATO at that
yes,
point.
no, not supported. But they had the experience of the Donbass war from 2014. From
Yeah.
2014, when they got battered by the Russian air power, they put their air defenses underground. They put their command and control structures underground. They strengthened their communication and connectivities and media in a manner that redundancy was built. The reason is that the Russian could not kill. Now, going forward, once they moved forward and the Russian war machine opened a blitzkrieg of mechanized forces, three types of weapons played up. One is anti-tank missile, second is drones, and third is manpad. The drones, Ukraine realized that Russian air defenses lacked anti-drone weaponry. They had
I
conventional,
see.
yes, they had conventional air defense weapons like guns, like missiles, like short-range, medium-range missiles, and towed and self-propelled guns. But anti-drone weaponry is the capability to detect small radar cross-section drones of the cross-section 0.001 to 0.003 square meter and kill them instantly using soft kill and hard kill measure. They did not have. Due to this, the drones which were used by Ukraine that time started to do a great damage. Ukraine is the only country in the world that has a separate branch in their forces dedicated to drones only. As per
My gosh.
as per President Zelensky, Ukraine will make 2 million drones per year in 2024. And more than that if the results are provided. If you see Black Sea operation, here is a country in the world without navy, which has sunk 26 Russian naval ships in the Battle of Black Sea. Look at the drone power. And today, the drone power is playing so much that it is, you hear the normal interview of Russian people, they say that these drones have made our life miserable in the day-to-day functioning. And Kremlin, in stores, and grocery stores, and not only ammunition depot, it is taking the war into Russia. Russia doesn't mind. It is replying back. Today, day for yesterday's attack with 120 missiles and 91 drones attacked Kyiv. It is one on one. Russia doesn't mind that. It is not touching their nuclear doctrine, but the drone power is playing. 5th January 2018 is the day when Russia suffered its first drone attack in the Battle of Khmeimim and in Western Syria, and Tartus naval base in Western Syria. 13 drones only came and damaged Kharkiv. So Ukraine learned that lesson. Russia does not have anti-drone weapons. Hit them hard now. But today Russia is much smarter. They got anti-drone weapons. They got electronic warfare weapons. They got drone guns. Today, they cannot do. Even the first FPV drones are being destroyed by Russia in a great numbers. So
So if I can come to you, Vanshika, I mean, this new Russia that is emerging as a real superpower in Europe, and with the friends, I mean, in the closet like Germany, do you see this kind of Russia's challenging the might of the US and of course Britain, the United Kingdom, which wants to go back to having a bigger role in Europe? What do you see Russia doing in the future? Do you think it will challenge the US, or will it sort of make peace, you think? A false peace, which I think it will be a false peace.
Yes. So Russia definitely is attempting to challenge, say, US hegemony. I'm not sure how far it has succeeded in doing so and how it will continue to succeed, if at all. Because you see, Nina, it's trying to also, I think, create a new Eurasian security architecture. And by involving North Korea, by involving a nuclear pariah, I think going forward, any settlement is going to be a lot more complicated because now the conflict is not just a European conflict. It has expanded geographically. And Russia, I think the aims that it had, I think it has realized that the war was a strategic catastrophe, and it's now trying to rebuild its image by, as we've seen, nuclear positioning and all of that. Germany, we've seen, has taken a more conservative stance, has not allowed the use of its missiles. UK, I'm not sure, has the same revisionist tendencies as Russia has had in the since a long time. Um, but as you said, Russia is definitely on the road and definitely has a will to challenge, which is also exemplified. It's trying to create a very strong industrial base. It's moving towards a war economy. It's appointing economists as in important positions of defense. So it realizes that it has to be economically strong in order to continue this fight. So there are several internal challenges that Russia is grappling with in order to challenge other countries internationally.
That's very interesting. So very, very important actually that we note that Russia is not yet ready to take on that role, although it has always seen itself as a major power. I mean, one of the leading powers. There's also talk behind the scenes, Ambassador Fabian, that there's some kind of reach out between Moscow and Washington. There was Wendy Sherman, the US Deputy Secretary of State. She did hold talks with Russia before she retired. This was in April 2022, after talks in Istanbul, Putin had apparently sort of indicated that he would agree to the terms. I mean, this is a Reuters report that I read, which says that Vladimir Putin is open to discussing a Ukraine ceasefire deal with Donald Trump, but rules out making any major territorial concessions. So he basically wants guarantees that first that Kyiv will not be given a NATO membership. Have you heard anything along those lines? And do you think it's a possibility? Because if they freeze the conflict, which is what Russia wants, then he will be able to keep the four eastern regions that they now control, which is Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. So, are we looking at where both sides are going to grab as much territory and solidify their hold on these areas before any move to hold peace talks? And if at all, if Zelensky agrees to meet face to face with the Russians and the Russians accept him as the interlocutor.
Thank you. President Putin his public position is clear. He himself has stated it. We don't have to go to Wendy Sherman. President Putin has said that he is prepared to have ceasefire talks provided the existing realities, military realities are recognized. And President Zelensky, on the other hand, says, well, Russia should withdraw first and then we will have peace talks. Now, let me ask you, if Russia withdraws, then what is the need for further talks? So what I'm trying to say is that Zelensky's position is rather, well, what shall I say, is not serious. He is making statements for the sake of making statements. Whereas when Putin says that he is prepared to sit down and talk, but all sides should recognize the military realities, well, he means it. Now, what is going to happen, as I mentioned earlier, is that once Trump comes in, then there will be secret negotiations between Trump and Putin, and then there will be a ceasefire because Zelensky cannot continue the war without the support of the West, which will dramatically dwindle once Trump comes in.
That's very interesting. I agree with you. I don't think he'll be able to fight. I mean, Ukraine will not be able to fight without Western support. General, we're reaching the end of our program. So can you give me concluding remarks? I honestly believe that a freeze, a pause to the war may or may not happen. I don't see it happening because NATO will have to agree to never give Ukraine NATO membership or keep the territory it has taken, right? And Russia is not going to agree to, any of this.
Actually, you hit the nail on the head. Today, we are at a stage when the two warring nations are not only at loggerheads or the extreme 180-degree position on the military or battlefield, they're also in their talking points, in their projected positions, and so on. Look what Ambassador just now spoken. What President Zelensky's victory plan, resilience plan, and whatever plan. What is the crux of it? 3 points. Unilateral withdrawal of Russia from all the occupied territory, point 1. Point 2, Putin to be tried and others as a war criminal. And third, money from the rest of the world for reconstruction and rehabilitation. 3 points stated. Now Putin's point. First point. Ukraine should abandon all its dreams of NATO membership. It's a no-go, number 1. Number 2, realize the military realities as of today and accept it. In fact, in the long history lesson or the article which President Putin has written, Ukraine is not a country. It is an artificial creation by Lenin. And Ukraine, Belarusian, all are Kievian, Russian. They need to be united as one. He says natural division. Now look at the loggerhead position. It's a non-meeting position. Look at the joke which happened in Switzerland for the peace talk. Me and you are fighting. Somebody is brokering a peace. They call you, but they don't call me.
Yeah.
Is it a joke happening or what is happening, Bhaiya? This is something which sums up the position today. Today, you can forget about the peace which is conceivable across the table on both ends. One of them has to give in for the others to be accommodated. That is the
Mm.
crux of the position as on.
That's very interesting. Vanshika, if I can come to you, would you like to give us your call on this so-called Putin's visit to India, which has been much talked about? They said sooner rather than later was the exact quote of the Kremlin spokesperson. Could India be seen as offering a neutral platform where such talks, if at all they happen, could take place? I mean, it could provide the right atmospherics. It does. Does it have any kind of meeting ground with Russia or Ukraine on this?
Yes, that's very interesting, Neena. So, if we see that, Modi recently, even when he went to the BRICS summit and when he visited both Putin and Zelensky later, he has always spoken about how war is not the answer and how, he has gone
He
out
said this
and
is no time
seen.
for war.
Yes, he said there's no time for war. So India has been very vocal about its non-support for any sort of violence. So yes, and I think Zelensky has also, encouraged India to take a more mediating position. And as we see India's foreign policy, we've seen that it has maintained a very, I would say, a very nuanced stance where it has. Not outright, not gone outright and, condemned Russia directly, but it has made clear what it feels about Russia's aggression. At the same time, not economically isolating Russia or geopolitically, mind you. So I think it's very important for Putin also to have India as a friend, because if one of Biden's aim, was to economically crumble Russia or to geopolitically isolate Russia, it failed on those fronts. Um, so yes, I am not sure how large a role India can play in bringing the war to an end, especially given Trump's remarks, Trump's dislike for war, and he wants to bring a swift end. Now, whether that will be on very likely would be on Russia's terms, given his ties with Putin, and whether there is, on the immediate front, a resolution or an escalation of the conflict, we do not yet know. But definitely, India can play a role in this.
That's very interesting. Ambassador Fabian, concluding remarks, and after that, General, quick concluding remarks. I've only got 4 minutes left.
Well, I mean, you raised the matter of India's playing a mediatory role.
Yeah.
My view is that it is President Trump who is going to take the leading role. And it is not that, Putin and Zelensky have to sit at the table. No, these things are not done that way.
Yeah.
It is done by diplomats. So,
Correct.
and that is
Yeah, I'm sure you've done it many times.
very likely to happen. So let us hope that it will happen sooner rather than later, because by prolonging this war, more and more fellow human beings are getting killed,
Yes.
and lot of destruction, more and more destruction is taking place. So it is most important that there should be early ceasefire, yesterday, not today.
Good point. General, would you like to wrap up? I mean, will
I
you see
will.
the US
Yeah.
dragged deeper into this if there's no
Yeah.
ceasefire and Russia refuses to play ball?
Then the things will continue. But I want to say, as you said, concluding remarks so that the show, the content remains comprehensive as far as my humble knowledge goes. Two actions on the 999th day of the war of agreeing to give nuclear anti-personnel landmines and allowing Ukraine to use long-range missiles inside Russian territory were driven by the compulsions which President Biden finds himself today. The action on the 1000th day by Ukraine to fire that missile on Bryansk talked about is rooted in the desperation in which President Zelensky finds himself today. And on the same day, the lowering of the nuclear threshold or amending the nuclear threshold by Putin also is a continuation of his signaling to say that he is not prepared to have the US and the West in direct confrontation with him in this war, and his two conditions of no NATO membership for UK and reality of military realities to be recognized get a thumping corroboration in whatever he has said. So these are my thoughts at this moment of what has happened in these 3 days.
Anyway, to my mind, as we conclude, I still see Russia as holding the upper hand, and that Ukraine having enormous, West backing until Trump comes in. And really, we have to look at what Russia will gain from any kind of a ceasefire, because it already, as you said, General, holds 11,000 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory, and Ukraine barely has Kursk, which they could lose any day now, given the push towards Kursk. Thank you very much, Ambassador Fabian. Thank you very much, General Sachdeva and Vanshika Saraf, for taking part in this discussion. Thank you, viewers. Please click on the new Indian Express website and watch and share Global Express.